Marvel's Phoenix Man, The Ultimate Power Rises. Please like, share, and subscribe. Episode 26. Leon could feel the trembling on Lorna Dane's delicate body, and at this time she finally removed her disguise, and the fear in her heart was completely exposed. No matter what, she was just a little girl who was still underage. In the face of a person who can defeat and kidnap Magneto, she really has no intention of resisting. Seeing her uneasiness, Leon laughed instead, and said, "There is one thing I need to explain to you, that I will not do anything to your father. At least one thing is guaranteed, that is, your father's life will not be in any problem." "No, that's not what I care about." Lorna Dane shook her head. "His life or death has nothing to do with me. I just want to know what you will do with me." Leon raised an eyebrow and smiled. "Deal with you? You may be thinking too much. Why should I deal with you? Because I'm a mutant," Lorna Dane said. It was so interesting to see her pretend to be calm with fear, and Leon almost couldn't stop laughing. "I won't do anything to you, you can rest assured. The reason why I tied up your father is just to get something on him. As for what it is, you don't need to know. You just have to remember that I won't hurt you," Leon affirmed. "Really?" Lorna Dane looked at him and asked. "Of course it's true." Hearing him say this, Lorna Dane was obviously relieved, and only then did she find herself wrapped around Liang's waist, and the whole person was attached to him. She did not show the shyness of the Oriental woman, but fell generously, reached out and climbed Liang's chest, and directly closed her eyes and put the small head together. Only then did a question mark appear in Liang's mind, and he felt his lips being pressed up by the soft lips of the other party. French kiss? Liang, this idea arises, and then immersed in it. Sitting in the arms is not his style, the beauty is in the arms. The other party sent a fragrant kiss, do not white. A passionate kiss took 3 minutes, and finally made Lorna Dane gasp. "Oh my god, your lung capacity is really amazing. What are you capable of, mutants?" Lorna Dane asked curiously. "As a matter of sincerity, you should tell me first." Leon laughed. "I can control the magnetic force, like this," Lorna Dane said, and held out her hand to the side, and saw that the metal on a bench next to her began to tremble, and then the metal fell off the bench and was squeezed into a round ball by an invisible force, and finally Lorna Dane withdrew her hand, and the metal ball fell on her hand. "Like this, I can control the metal, but the strength of the control is not too high, and I can only lift a ton of metal at most, or hover 3 bullets," Lorna Dane said directly. Leon was surprised by the girl's honesty, and then asked, "When did you awaken your abilities?" "I was in a coma a little over a month ago," she said. Leon nodded, then looked at her with a smirk and asked, "Then why did you just say that I can help you?" Lorna Dane sighed for some reason, so she rested her head on his shoulder before saying, "Since the day I knew I was a mutant, I have understood one thing. Ordinary life will definitely have nothing to do with me in the future, and as a mutant, I will be discriminated against by normal humans. My biological father was working for the social status of the mutants, but the direction of his efforts seemed to me to be wrong, too extreme, and now the mutants have such a living environment, and a large part of the reason is that he caused it. And..." She paused and said, "And I don't think he's right, but I don't think Professor Charles is right. Mutants do need to fight for their rights, but the means of fighting are not so intense. Mutants can actually create more value for society as a whole." As she stood up, she held out her hand again, and the metal ball in her hand slowly floated out, and then spread out in midair, squeezed into a sheet by an invisible force, and then the sheet split apart, buckled together with each other, and gradually formed the shape of a small house. For example, if I can put it on the building, I don't know how much I can reduce the application of large machinery. Of course, this is only the most obvious. If put into scientific research or production, my ability will be more valuable." Leon raised an eyebrow, and now he was really surprised. Is this still the extreme and irritable North Star from the original book? Such a correct 3 views. Who in the end created her? Leon found himself somewhat mistaken in his understanding of Marvel's original book. Seeing his face, Lorna Dane shrugged and said, "You don't have to look at me like this. I'm different from other mutants. I have my own insistence." Episode 27. "You haven't answered my question yet." Leon smiled. Lorna Dane was slightly silent, and then looked up at him sharply. "If you can defeat Magneto, then your ability must be the top of all mutants in the world, and I think that maybe the opportunity for the entire mutant race to change should appear in you." Leon shook his head with a smile. He let go of the North Star, and then said to the latter, "I'm not the one who can change the mutant race, so you'd better not put your hopes on me." "Why?" Lorna Dane asked. Leon thought for a moment before replying, "Because except for the accidents of the people I care about, I don't care about the lives of others at all. In my opinion, what the mutant race will become, that's the matter of the entire mutant race. The leader has the ability or the ability, it has nothing to do with me. I just want to do my own thing." This is his answer, but also what he thinks in his heart. Since he came to this world, his first thought is to live well, and then he feels that living is not nothing, he must live happily. He has his own goals, and now he has been working towards them, and the lives of others will indeed not let him take them to heart. Lorna Dan did not feel any disappointment because of his words, but instead shrugged her shoulders. I may have been mentally prepared for this. After all, it is too difficult to change the whole world. No, it's not that I can't change the world, but I don't want to pay attention to the mutant race, and I have to make this clear to you. I do have the ability to change the whole world, and even if I wanted to, I could make a huge difference in the whole world in a short period of time, but I don't put myself on the side of the mutants. Leon said directly. Lorna Dane nodded silently, and then sighed. I should have guessed that a genius like you, with such a large capital at such a young age, really wouldn't let himself be tied to a certain side. Leon shrugged his shoulders and didn't say anything more, but by this time, the ambiguous atmosphere between the two had faded a lot, and Lorna Dan sent him away, and then took his hand, and the two of them walked forward. At this time, the two were like two very normal lovers, snuggling together, walking aimlessly forward, and after half a moment Lorna Dan said, "You know what? It was my first kiss. Do you need me to be responsible?" Leon asked with a smile. "Of course, if you're willing to be responsible, that's great, and I want to find myself a reliever." Lorna Dane laughed as well. "Well, then from now on, you're my girlfriend," Leon said directly. He has a good feeling for Lorna Dane, which he does not deny, and the reasons for their respective personalities also make the two not have a confession and emotional heating process like a normal couple from the beginning, and perhaps the relationship between the two will gradually increase in the future, but it will not be now. "Okay." Lorna Dane turned her head to look at him with a smile in her eyes. She was so direct. From her, Leon experienced the charm that was different from other women, that is, a kind of determination that did not drag the mud and water, just like just now directly asking him if he was a mutant, and directly telling him that he was a mutant. If he were to change to another woman, he would definitely hide this secret in the deepest part of his heart. Then the two did not think about anything else, although abrupt, but the two still grasped the trick of getting along with each other in an instant, and Leon did not treat her like other women, but gave her considerable respect. The two of them just wandered all the way, waiting until it was dark before choosing to return, and on the way back, Leon suddenly came to say a word. "You can rest assured that I won't do any harm to your father, Magneto, and in fact, in a few days, I'll let them go." "Well, thank you." Lorna Dane's voice was slightly flat. Magneto was just a symbol in her mind, a symbol representing her biological father, and there was no practical feeling, but Leon could say so, or let her feel respected. "Also, didn't you ask me in the afternoon what my abilities were?" Leon smiled. The latter looked up at him, did not say a word at this time, and then saw Leon pull up his hand, and the next moment, a brilliant brilliance appeared strangely on the hand that Leon was holding, and the light was twisting, and there was no stereotype, thinking that it was a brilliant ribbon, wrapping the hands of the two together. "My ability is mind control, and there is also the release of heat energy. I can simulate my ability into sunlight, but also can form flames." Lorna Dan looked at the splendor in their hands in amazement, unsure. "Is this an aurora?" "Yes, this is the aurora. Maybe we are a pair that is destined to be a natural couple." Episode 29. 7 days later, Leon's vacation time ended and he returned to the 6th District Laboratory. Here, Magneto and the Wonder Woman were already lying quietly in the nutrition barn, their eyes closed, as if they had fallen into a deep sleep. Leon stood in front of the two nutrition barns, looking at the two people in the nutrition barn, and Han Yen did not move. "Sir, all the fusion preparations have been completed, and you can fuse the X genes of the Electromagnet King and the Witch." "I don't know," when Svija's voice rang in Leon's ears. "Got it, let's get started." Leon's voice was flat, and he turned away and went to another laboratory, stripping his side as before, lying down in the nutrient trough, allowing Svija to manipulate several robotic arms, fiddling back and forth on his body. Like the last time, he raised a trough around the test bench, which was gradually filled with nutrient solution. He wore a breathing hood on his mouth and nose. He knew all kinds of monitoring lines, and a named air tube was inserted into his body and penetrated deep into his body. Liang's healing factor X gene from the saber-toothed tiger had completely calmed down 2 days earlier, and the changes brought about by the healing factor had made his body and the power of the phoenix reach a balance, and now his body was undergoing subtle changes from the inside out, every moment. This change is a slow enhancement, because the power of the phoenix is increasing, and this energy comes from the deepest part of the universe, and the source can even point to the wall membrane of the universe, which is a place where even the gods rarely touch. The power of the phoenix is born between the chaos of the universe and the beginning of all things. It is the child of the universe, with the energy of the entire universe as a backing. According to Leon, if in the 3rd stage, he can even use this to control the energy of the entire universe. With the whole cosmic energy as the cornerstone, he can also raise his other X-gene mutant abilities to the level of cosmic horror, and when the time comes, it will be the real snowball. Strengthen the flesh with healing factors, withstand more phoenix power, and then grow with each other, so that they are growing every moment, and at this stage to fuse other abilities, and then use more phoenix power energy to grow and catalyze other abilities, so that they grow all the way to the point of infinity. That was his plan at the beginning. The power of the Phoenix is one of the most powerful in the Marvel world, but this kind of divine power has a shackle in nature, that is to say, the Phoenix power has a limit, and its limit is the entire universe, because although the power of the Phoenix has radiated the entire multiverse in the later stage, it can easily open the dimensional door to other worlds, but the first thing to pay attention to is that this is only wandering in the distant universe, not how far the universe is controlled. As the man who aspires to be the most capstone, Leon's ambition is far more than that, wandering in the universe far. To put it bluntly, it is the experience of other worlds. If he only has the power of the Phoenix, he may be able to start again in other universes after the perfect mastery, but that is just like now, one universe to restand to the top, which is too time-consuming, and he cannot leave the limitations of the multiverse. The culmination of Leon's vision is to stand at the highest point of the entire multiverse, overlooking the entire Marvel Far universe, and even one day transcend the multiverse and stand outside the world. This is his ultimate goal, and now, the genes of Magneto and the Wonder Woman are his small stepping stones to this goal. Based on the power of the Phoenix, he will fuse more powerful abilities in the days to come, and then use the power of the entire universe to strengthen these abilities until he can really get to that point. The laboratory was extremely quiet, only the mechanical sound of the mechanical arm moving, and some subtle sounds from the operation of the instrument. Leon did not close his eyes, he looked at the movement of the mechanical arm in the nutrient solution. As last time, in the thin tubes connected to his body, there was a reddish liquid flowing in and injected into his body, which were all genetic stocks. This time, the first fusion is the magic female gene, which is a very unique mutant ability, and its ability itself does not need to be dwelled upon, just the unique effect of being able to neutralize other mutant abilities can explain its extraordinary. The magic woman's ability, which will be a security lock that will carry more capabilities in the future, is a very important part of his entire plan, and its importance is actually far more than Magneto's magnetic control ability. Liang's body trembled slightly after the gene stock solution was injected, and other people's X genes appeared in the body, and there would be a rejection reaction first, but because of the healing factors, they were rapidly fusing with each other. This fusion is different from before, this time the performance is more pure and direct. He is going to use his own healing factors to swallow and transform these X genes, which is a perfect fusion. The previous integration was just the result of eliminating various drawbacks by scientific and technological means. Time passed slowly, and in the blink of an eye, more than 2 hours passed, and Leon closed his eyes after the gene stock solution was injected into his body, and carefully observed his own changes, which were very subtle, but he could easily detect them with telepathy. The change first came from the genetic level, his genes were embedded in the magic woman's perfect transformation ability, and then the position changed at the cellular level, and all the cells in his whole body began to adapt to this new ability from the inside out, and then this change extended to the whole body. At this time, through the transparent nutrient tank, the surface of his body has been changing colors, like a chameleon, sometimes into leopard-like skin, sometimes into a crocodile armor like a leather armor, and sometimes simply into a female body, all kinds of changes back and forth, until he opened his eyes, only to become his original appearance. The X-gene fusion of the Wonder Woman has become. This fusion is an extremely thorough kind, it will not be like the healing factor, with the growth of the Phoenix's power, and let the body produce damage and repair. After the fusion is completed, it is equivalent to becoming Liang's own gene, just like the innate, there will be no rejection reaction. Liang held out his hand in the nutrient solution, and when his thoughts moved slightly, he saw that his hand had become a tiger's claw, a horse's hoof, and a wing. Sure enough, with the power of the Phoenix and the healing factor, the reason why it has become extremely powerful is that the transformation ability of the fusion is much more powerful than that of the Wonder Woman herself. In the original book, the Wonder Woman can only change between human forms or humanoids, and her own quality cannot be changed, but she is not limited by this, which is very good. Leon thought so, and was extremely satisfied with this, which met his expectations, and the ability of the demon woman did surprise him. This is exactly the 72 changes in mythology. If you can grasp more energy and your body is more powerful in the future, then it is entirely possible to turn your body into a giant, or as small as a mustard seed. Episode 30. The fusion did not stop. After fusing the ability of the demonic woman, he still lay in the nutrient trough, allowing himself to settle for 2 hours, and then Svija began to fuse the X-gene of Magneto for him as originally planned. Still just like before, the reddish liquid implanted into his body from the pipe, and began to merge with his own genes. The process was still slow, Leon's breathing was steady, his eyes were closed, as if he was sleeping, but the eyeballs under his eyelids were turning slightly. Time passed bit by bit, and before long, the nutrient solution in the nutrient tank began to grunt and bubble up, and these bubbles seemed to come out of his body. This phase lasted half an hour, and after half an hour, the robotic arms that hung down from above, as well as the robotic arms that emerged from around the test bench, began to tremble slightly. There was a harsh siren in the room, but it only sounded twice before it stopped, which was the laboratory's alarm procedure, and any changes that were not man-made or not manipulated by Leon and the authorized person would cause such an alarm. The shaking of those mechanical arms just now was caused by the leakage of Liang's spiritual power, which naturally made the laboratory's alarm program respond, and then it was blocked by Svija, which although not an intelligent creature, but a near-intelligent program, some of Liang's supernatural influences, it can be clearly analyzed. All this is in Leon's perception, but he naturally does not respond to the outside world now. And then more than an hour passed, Liang has maintained the state, but gradually, the bubbles in the nutrition trough have calmed down, and there is no movement in the half-shaking, and Liang is really like asleep, even the eyeballs have not moved again. Time passed minute by minute, and when 2 hours after injecting the Magneto X gene, Leon finally opened his eyes. At the same time, all the surveillance wires that possessed metal wires attached to his body were stripped away by invisible forces, and the robotic arms above and around him were pushed away. This invisible force is not controlled by his mind, but by magnetism, and this is the first time he has controlled metal in a magnetic way, which feels very wonderful. His body slowly floated from the nutrient trough, water droplets dripped down, and people changed from lying flat to standing upright. Liang looked around at this time, slightly shaking his fist. With his movements, all the metal-containing things around him were trembling slightly, and as the power of his control over the magnetic force increased, a monitor on the side was pinched into a ball by an invisible force in a harsh metal twisting sound, directly scrapped. Phew! Liang exhaled a deep breath, feeling this new ability of his own, and the corners of his mouth gradually outlined a smile. This kind of power is really powerful enough. No wonder the original comics said that Magneto is the king who controls magnetic force, and even controls the electromagnetic force of the entire universe when it is the most powerful, which cannot be false. Although I am using this ability for the first time, as one of the 4 basic forces of the universe, I do have the power to change the operation state of the entire universe, and now even if I only talk about magnetic control, I am now much stronger than Magneto, all of which also benefits from the power of the Phoenix and the powerful flesh as the foundation. Liang shifted his gaze around, his thoughts moved, and in the magnetic induction, he saw countless lines in front of his eyes within the time limit. These lines were colorful, filling every corner of his vision. Electromagnetic waves, microwaves, visible light, this is the magnetic point of view. I can see any form of electromagnetic waves. Every line here represents an electromagnetic wave. Ordinary people can only see the real world less than 5/10,000th of a thousandth, and now I can see the world that is 100 times different from ordinary people with this perspective. The world is in front of my eyes. The secret will be further reduced. With that, he stretched out his hand and flicked a pale yellow line in front of him, and a few kilometers away, in a very ordinary family, a person was watching TV, and as Leon was fiddling with the line, snowflakes flashed on the TV. Fuck. The cable TV network is such a rubbish. The man watching the TV shouted angrily. Leon fiddled with a lilac thread again, and then he heard the sound of a conversation in his ear. Honey, are you free now? There was no one in my house, and my parents were out. Well, I'll be there soon. This is obviously a pair of little lovers, ready to do something shameful. Then he played with a cyan silk thread, and then he felt a special signal in his mind, which was the signal of the wireless network. He thought slightly, and infiltrated his spiritual power into it, and immediately felt a huge amount of information from it, which was all information on the internet, and he could even surf the internet with pure spiritual power, and he could also access the home page of his own company. This is the World Wide Web, and if I wanted to, I could hack any website with my own abilities. Svija. Leon suddenly summoned Svija in the network with his mental power, and the latter responded quickly. I am, sir, you are in a very strange state at this time. I can feel your presence on the internet. This is the first time you and I have communicated with me in the form of information on the internet. Svija wrote. Yes, this is a new application of my ability, and in the future I will be able to communicate with you directly on the network without calling you. Leon wrote. Yes, sir. This ability will solve most of the communication problems between us, so intuitive that I can understand the true meaning of each of your thoughts without even having to analyze your language and tone. It's true. Leon smiled and nodded. Then he disconnected from the network, and his body slowly drifted down from the air, waving, and the clothes on the side automatically fell into his hands, put them on 3 or 2 times, and at the same time said, although I can communicate directly with you in the network, under normal circumstances, we still communicate in this mode, which helps you enrich your database. Alright, sir. Svija's response was also crisp. Liang is now very satisfied. He has 2 powerful new abilities, which is not a small growth for him, which makes him 1 step closer to his intended goal. Find a time later today to let go of all the mutant brotherhood. Leon wrote. At this stage, these people have lost much effect on him. The X genes on these people have been sealed. The 2 most powerful abilities he has now possessed. Other abilities he does not look up to, but these abilities can be used to strengthen his own power. In addition, from now on, expand the people of the Dark Ministry, the specific personnel you choose. Remember to choose those who have criminal experience. It is best to choose in prison, and then send someone to rob out, and then wash away the memory and instill a new personality. He said again. Okay, sir. Svija responded. Request for evaluation, Episode 31. The expansion of the personnel of the Dark Department has a complete process. The premise is that the X gene has awakened people, that is, mutants, and then the radical of the mutants. It is best to commit crimes, because there are many such people. Just in New York, some special prisons are holding a lot of such people. It is also such a person, as long as he washes away his mind and instills a new personality into it, that he will receive Liang's complete control. Then give itself some modifications, fuse the healing factor X gene, or the X gene of other mutant abilities, so that it will become a powerful mutant. As for the death of these people in the dark part, to be honest, Leon did not care too much, because in his opinion, these people were not even experimental materials, and in such a society, how much they wanted. It's also time to grow the Dark Ministry, and there will be many places where they will be used in the future. Leon thinks so. After he obtained the mutant abilities of Magneto and the demonic woman, he can now feel his own changes every minute, and the healing factor balances his body with the power of the Phoenix, so that his physical strength and the power of the Phoenix are growing together. After adding the magic female ability equivalent to the neutralizer, it is directly like a safety lock, locking the healing factor and the power of the Phoenix and the ability of magnetic control, so that the foundation is extremely strong. With the continuous growth of the Phoenix Force, even with the new abilities, it will gradually improve in the future, so that he has a stronger and faster growth space than other mutants. Sure enough, what you envisioned is not wrong. The power of the Phoenix should naturally be regarded as the foundation of growth, equivalent to strengthening its own booster, rather than its own life-saving ability. At best, it is a trump card. His mind power radiated through the thick earth, extending all the way to the surface of the earth without stopping, and even finally extending to a height of more than 3,000 meters. Now the mental power, or spiritual power, has also made full progress, and it will not be too long before I can even wrap up the entire earth with the power of the mind, and at that time, I can be regarded as having absolute strength on the entire earth and the ability to cope with other major events. At the thought of it, the figure disappeared from the laboratory and appeared at an altitude of thousands of meters, surrounded by an electromagnetic barrier, cutting off his own contact with the outside world. Looking at the metropolis beneath my feet, feeling the dense electromagnetic lines in the air, I couldn't help but laugh. After the ability is strong, sure enough, the mood will also be affected, and now I actually have a little sense of divinity. Thinking like this, he shook his head again, knowing that this was an illusion brought about by a sudden increase in ability. The mentality has to be calmer, the world is not as simple as I think. Then he returned to his residence, the top floor of the sword-shaped tall building, and subconsciously looked at the next door. There was no one there. At this time, it was estimated that Tony Stark's guy should still be asleep on the meat bed. With his nature, this kind of thing is very common. He was idle for the time being, but the news that Svija brought next made him slightly stunned. Sir, Mr. Tony is missing. Missing? He immediately remembered the original plot, and it seemed that Stark had been kidnapped by terrorists at this time. When? He asked. Stark Industries had not been able to contact Mr. Tony since 2 days earlier, and I checked the correspondence records of Obadiah Stein to determine that Mr. Tony was missing. In addition, I have been monitoring Obadiah Stein according to your previous account, and I have been able to determine that he is the conspirator behind it. Svija said. Leon nodded, he still remembered the plot. Sir, I have searched the location of the man who kidnapped Mr. Tony. Do I want to send someone to rescue him? Svija asked. Leon shook his head. No, let him find a way for himself. He can come back, then he is Iron Man. If he can't come back, he can't blame others when he dies. By the way, send a secret message to Tony's smart housekeeper Jarvis, tell it about Obadiah Stein's ghosting, and come to wait for Tony to get out of trouble, and there will definitely be a good scene after knowing the reason for the incident. Okay, sir. Leon did not take this matter too seriously. In his opinion, this kind of plot because of his existence, between the state of occurrence and will not happen, it does not matter, it does not happen, it is only a good drama, he will be a qualified spectator, that is, sitting on the sofa holding popcorn. Other than that, he won't have any other movements. Episode 32. Leon really had an eye-opening feeling. He was amazed by the precision of these people's plans, the unity of action, and the amazing results, which once again made him have a different understanding of ordinary people, which completely met his expectations of mankind. Sure enough, without heavy pressure, there is no potential to erupt, and this exquisite cooperation can be called a miracle in the entire history of mankind, an asteroid fall crisis with a diameter of more than 2,000 meters, so it was resolved. The price is only the previous missile. There are several nuclear bombs, and finally only let the Earth appear 4 magnitude earthquake level vibration. This It's an eye-opener. Leon was full of admiration, and it was reasonable to say that his plan had been blocked, and he should be very angry, but in fact he did not have this emotion at all, but he was very happy, because he saw the human potential, and the human ability to bear. In this way, he can use more force to toss in the future. Ha ha ha. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but let out a hearty laugh, which made Lorna next to him look strange, and said, You wouldn't be dizzy, would you? Leon laughed and choked, and then said without anger, What's the matter? I'm just happy, forget it, you don't understand men's minds. Lorna skimmed her lips and ignored his sexist remarks. At this time she was actually in a good mood, at least she didn't have to watch the world being destroyed by her own man, otherwise, she would have a sense of guilt. They were far away from the location of the nuclear explosion. The distance was 3,000 or 4,000 meters, and during the conversation, the shock wave of the nuclear explosion had spread over, and Lorna was suddenly a little worried, while Liang was slightly outstretching his hand, and there was already a light curtain rising in front of him, instantly blocking out all the shock waves. Boom! At this time, the earth-shattering sound resounded in the ears of the three people, but the corners of the three people's clothes did not tremble, and then Liang said calmly, Such a large nuclear explosion energy cannot be wasted, saying that his 5 fingers were open. At this moment, the invisible force spread, and the heavens and the earth seemed to produce a shock, and the huge mushroom cloud that rose up in the distance was fixed on the ground, and for an instant it became forbidden to move. Ah! Lorna exclaimed, how not to understand that this was Leon ghosting. She seemed very shocked, playing with the energy of the nuclear bomb explosion, which seemed to her to be somewhat unimaginable. Shrink. Liang's voice was flat, 5 fingers shrunk, at the same time he saw the energy of the nuclear explosion, and the extremely bright hot energy quickly began to contract, just like a black hole was generated, and all the energy began to collapse towards the center point. In just a few moments, the energy of the tens of millions of tons of TNT explosion suddenly shrank into a point that was bright and extreme. This scene was captured by the cameras carried by the plane in the sky, and all those who saw this scene were terrified, because people with a little scientific knowledge knew that such a terrible energy was compressed in one point, that it will form a matter of extremely dense mass. If there is no collapse, it can even form a black hole. But these are pure energy, not matter, so all they worry about is that the disappearance of this bondage will again produce an energy eruption that is more terrifying than a nuclear explosion, a kind of energy eruption similar to a gamma ray burst. Liang only smiled faintly and waved to the small point of light in the distance, and then this energy-gathering body flew towards him rapidly, and quickly landed in his hand. This energy aggregate looked like a point in the distance, but in his hand was a round ball the size of a fist, emitting an incomparably brilliant light, the brightness of which had exceeded that of the sun, and if anyone looked at it, he would be blind in an instant. Liang forgot to give the order, and Lorna subconsciously glanced at the bright light, and then with a scream, she covered her eyes and shrunk up. Liang was a little speechless, so he directly waved his hand to erase the blazing light above, and when the light disappeared, what appeared in Liang's hand was a ball with colorful streamers, which was extremely gorgeous. After a moment, Lorna's eyes recovered, but her body had been added to the healing factor by Liang, and the recovery ability was naturally very strong. Just now her eyes were instantly blinded by a strong light, and the kung fu of the 2 breaths this time had been restored. Is it all right? Leon asked. Lorna snorted, rubbed her still somewhat reddened eyes, and gave him a blank look. Liang smiled, saw that she was okay, and dragged the ball in front of her. This is the energy of the whole nuclear explosion, which was directly compressed by me. What are you going to do with it? Lorna asked curiously. What to do? Liang smiled at her and then said, naturally I ate it. Are you sure? Lorna was surprised. Liang shrugged his shoulders, said nothing more, opened his mouth, and swallowed the thing, directly. Yes, what he meant by eating was literal, that the energy eruption of a nuclear bomb was devastating to others, but to him it was nothing more than a tonic, something that could only be used by him to strengthen his own energy, and nothing special. This scene was naturally seen by some people, and at this time, still in the operational headquarters in the high air, the commander looked at this scene and his hands were trembling, and he hurriedly ordered, the combat mission is completed, now notify all combat units, retreat. If he could, he really didn't want to know about Leon's monster, even in the face of the danger of asteroid smashing, he didn't want to swing in front of Leon. Because there is a moment when the asteroid is broken, it is impossible to defeat Leon. His strength makes people despair, so he goes down to Ong to swallow the energy of the nuclear bomb, which is what normal people should do. Leon did not pay attention to the planes that flew away quickly. After swallowing the energy of the nuclear bomb, he focused on the vibratorium creation in the far distance. If he expected it well, it should be Wakanda's scientific and technological creation. He did not expect that in this crisis, there would actually be the figure of the Wakanda. Didn't they always avoid the world? With this thought, he pulled up Chirona and said, let's go. Subsequently, the figures of the 3 disappeared from the spot, and the next moment, they appeared on the vibrating gold creation. Episode 33. The shocking statue has 4 or 5 floors, a bit like the telescope of an observatory, a ball cracked from the center, with 6 tubes sticking together in the middle, and like the barrel of a Gatling machine gun, from which the previous high-energy laser beam was fired. This is obviously a turret, all of which are made of vibranium, and I think that the shield of the original captain of the United States, Steve, was synthesized from the original Edelman alloy and a small piece of vibranium, and that small piece of vibranium was extremely valuable at the time, even if it is put into the present, it is absolutely priceless. But now in front of Liang is a turret made of vibranium, and it is estimated that the weight alone has rushed through 1,000 tons, and the value of vibrating gold alone cannot be measured by money. Others don't know Wakanda's vibranium production, but Leon knows it very well. Vibranium gold is one of the hardest materials in the Marvel Universe, second only to Edelman alloy in the hardness of the alloy itself, and ranked first in defense because of the characteristics of absorbing kinetic energy. It is very hard, and the special molecular structure makes it almost indestructible, because its molecules are relatively stationary, so that it conducts almost no heat and kinetic energy, which can make it absorb heat, energy, and kinetic energy. Because of its particularity and practicality, Xinjiang has always been the most precious treasure pursued by many forces, and Wakanda, in order to avoid disasters, has used clever technology to hide the entire country from a long time ago, and has never revealed real science and technology to the outside world. The impression they leave on the world is always that poor and backward tribal country with low international influence to the dust, but it is such a country that is the most technologically advanced country in the world, and no one believes it at all. But Leon knows that Wakanda has a vibranium gold mine, and that vibranium gold mine is a natural meteorite, and the Wakanda royal family has been excavated for generations, and it has not been fully mined until now, which shows the degree of rotten streets inside Wakanda. But it is a bit ironic that this kind of mineral deposit, which is already huge, is rare and uncountable to the outside world. Liang's mind power spread out, enveloping the entire turret, and at this moment, the gun barrel shrank into the inside, and then quickly closed, followed by a dazzling split combination. The original spherical appearance suddenly turned into a sci-fi atmosphere of large fighter. I saw that the belly and tail of the fighter were simultaneously spewing out azure flames, and the random fighter quickly took off, and then quickly flew into the distance. The speed reached supersonic speed in a very short period of time, and the speed was still increasing rapidly. Huh? Liang looked slightly embarrassed, and then showed a smile, and he said to the 2 women, "You go back first, I will deal with some things, and I will go back in a while." She nodded. Lorna was also very knowledgeable. Without asking, Liang opened a time and space passage for the 2 women, and after watching the 2 women leave, he directly chased after the direction of the fighter plane flying away. The speed of the fighter is indeed extremely fast, and it has reached Mach 6 at this time, but for Leon, this is no different from the ants crawling. He is just a flash, and the figure appears on the top of the fighter. Nianli could clearly perceive the inside of the fighter. There were more than 10 people hiding inside. They seemed to have sensed Liang's presence, and their faces became ugly, and they were a little nervous when they said words that Liang couldn't understand. Liang took a moment, and as soon as his thoughts moved, the figure disappeared directly, and when he reappeared, it was already inside the fighter. As soon as he appeared, he was immediately discovered, and more than a dozen eyes looked at him together, with shock, and then he was pointed at by more than a dozen energy weapons, and a black man in the lead shouted, "Don't move, stand there." Liang turned his head to see. There were men and women in the dozen people, all of them were black, or the black one was very thorough. The leader he did not know, but the height was 2 meters a meter, extremely large. In the face of such a person, Liang only waved his hand slightly, and the leader was bound by an invisible force, and his body became immobile for an instant, and then in the frightened eyes of his companions, his body began to gradually become distorted. First of all, the hands and arms, inch by inch, were twisted into twists, the bone joints crackled, followed by the legs, and then the body. The leader's eyes were wide open, and his face could not see any change, but the trembling body and the whimpering throat could explain what terrible pain he was now enduring. Finally, the leader was crushed by the invisible force into a ball of flesh and blood, only the size of a basketball, and he had already died and could not die again. Ah! Finally, some people couldn't stand this situation and screamed out loud, with a thick fear and horror in their voices, and they finally remembered the horror of this person in front of Ming. Snap! Liang snapped his fingers, and the ball of flesh exploded in the middle of several people, and the power of the flesh and blood explosion was stronger than the bomb, and with a roar, the flesh and blood splashed, and the fragments were like bullets, piercing a person with one, but in a blink of an eye, all the remaining people were killed. Looking at the flesh and blood filth and dead bodies in front of him, Liang just casually flicked his fingers, and a wisp of reddish flame fell on the flesh and blood, as if there was a spirit, and in a few moments, these flesh and dead bodies were burned into fly ash. And Liang's look was still very plain, as if he had done something extremely insignificant, and his face did not change a bit. When he came to the cockpit, he saw a technical operation problem and a window like the cockpit of an airliner, but Leon knew that it was just a display. Leon took out an object that only had a thumb hit, found a secret slot, inserted it, and then said, Svija, hack the master control program of this fighter. Okay sir, I have come into contact with the fighter master control program, and now I am starting brute force cracking, and it is expected that the time will be calculated. 3 seconds later, Svija's voice came to his ear again. After the calculation is completed, it is expected to take 26 minutes. Okay, let's get started. Leon ordered. Okay sir, please wait. At this time, the fighter was still very fast, and it was an astonishingly fast one, but Leon just thought about it, and the speed of the plane began to plummet, even if the tail flame was still thin, but it had been fixed in the air. Such a good thing, you have to take it back and study it well. Episode 34. As Leon himself had said, it really didn't matter to him whether Tony hated him or not, all he wanted was an attitude from Tony, and it was only out of his personal taste, and the rest didn't matter. Now that it has been said, let's first see how to get rid of the radiation wounds on your body. Leon stood up and said. Tony looked shocked and asked, do you have this ability? Can't afford what I'm talking about? Leon just skimmed his lips. Then he stood next to him, put a hand directly on his shoulder, and said, don't delay, look at your face and the foundation is about to be spent. Tony was speechless. He had indeed asked Pepper to help him make up before he came, because he seemed to be okay now, but in fact there were tiny shrapnel left in his body, which could only be bound by the magnetic coil on his chest. In addition, he has a more difficult problem, that is, the radiation problem on his body. The plot is different, so that Leon now knows that Tony has been exposed to radiation sources during the kidnapping. That is to say, he is basically terminally ill now, and the known medical means cannot take out the tiny shrapnel in his body, some of which are so small that they are only as large as gravel, and they are almost traveling all over his body with metabolism, and if it were not for the magnetic coil in his chest, he would have died long ago because the shrapnel entered the heart. The main thing is that the radiation on his body is now on the verge of collapse, which is why he is so impatient. Originally, he had only come this time to get some help from Leon, mainly to help him develop an energy source suitable for the new suit, which was the most urgent thing for him now, because he wanted to use the suit to guard what he had in his hand. And he believed that with his genius mind and Leon's inhuman wisdom, the two would be able to cooperate to develop the energy for the new suit, but he did not expect to know the answer from Leon that could cure him. People don't want to die, especially people like him. He feels that he still has a lot of things to do, especially there are still many doubts that have not been solved. At this time, Leon has undoubtedly become his life-saving straw. Although he was extremely unwilling, at this point, he could only admit his fate. Suddenly he saw a flower, and the next moment, he felt that he appeared in a bright space, fixed his eyes. Here is clearly a well-equipped laboratory. All kinds of instruments are placed in the space. In the center is a test bench, somewhat similar to the shape of the operating table. Take off your clothes and lie down, I'll get the shrapnel out of your body first. Leon pointed to the test bench. Tony was still a little stunned. He understood that the instantaneous movement just now was a superpower, and at this time he couldn't help but look at Leon, who was still a light and cloudy look. He gritted his teeth and didn't say anything more. The problems in his body had reached the point where he had to be solved, and now he had no choice. Svija, get ready to start the experiment of transformation. Leon said loudly. Wait, who are you talking about? Who is Svija? Tony said suddenly. Svija, my smart assistant. Leon rode. Svija? Tony frowned. He had obviously guessed something. Don't guess, just go up and sleep honestly according to Jarvis's name, and when you wake up, you will find that the world is very different. Leon patted him on the shoulder. The corners of Tony's mouth twitched, and he didn't say anything more. Ian took off his clothes and lay down on the cold test bench. Leon stood next to the test bench without saying a word. Svija operated the mechanical arm to disinfect Tony's whole body, and then the test bench raised around the trough wall, and then the nutrient solution was poured into it. At this time, Tony had put a breathing hood on his nose and mouth, only to feel a slight pain in his neck, and for a moment he felt that everything in front of him began to rotate, and then his spirit became confused, and then he closed his eyes and passed out. Sir, what kind of ability do you need to implant in Mr. Tony? Svija asked. Nature is the healing factor, you calculate the best disgust, and then you start. Leon commanded. Okay sir. The healing factor has an unparalleled recovery effect on his own injury, and when Tony has this ability, the shrapnel in the body will be directly excreted, and the damage suffered by the body due to radiation will also quickly repair itself. He was eager to see what an Iron Man with superpowers looked like. Svija's calculations were quick, and after taking a sample of Tony's gene, it only took more than 5 minutes to choose the best injection plan, and all this did not require Leon to do, he just had to watch quietly. Episode 35. The laboratory was silent, only the mechanical sound of the mechanical arm moving, and Leon stood aside, quietly watching everything in front of him. Tony closed his eyes and lay quietly in the nutrient trough, the tiny needle tube on the robotic arm piercing his skin and injecting the genetic stock solution into his body. Svija calculated in advance to arrive at the most perfect modification formula. The gene stock solution is modulated into the most suitable model for Tony's ontological genes, and the so-called transformation is just this step. Because the fusion process is already very mature, and the more mature the technology and means, the simpler it will be, so all Leon has to do is to wait. Thanks to Tony's own radiation reception, the gene itself is destroyed, so the exclusivity from the genetic level is suppressed, so that the role of the gene stock solution is far greater than before, and the fusion is more direct. 10 minutes after the genetic stock solution was injected into Tony's body, Leon saw Tony's body change. I saw that the original pale color of Tony's body surface gradually became bloody, and the fist-sized magnetic coil on his chest was gradually squeezed out by the new flesh and blood. In addition, in the position of his chest, gradually there was blood seeping out of the skin and melting into the nutrient solution, and in that blood, you could still see the tiny residue, which was shrapnel. When Tony woke up, it was less than half an hour. He stood up from the nutrient solution, ripped off the surveillance patch attached to his body, pulled off the breathing mask and looked at his hands in a daze. "Is it already okay?" he asked with some uncertainty. Leon shrugged and said, "It's already. What time is it?" he asked again. "It's only been half an hour." "How can that be?" Tony was a little incredulous. He was also a frequent person who worked in the laboratory, and he knew how time-consuming and laborious scientific research would be, and in his mind, Leon would definitely take a lot of time to transform him into a mutant. After all, this is a scientific and technological ability that ordinary people cannot master. "That's true, and don't you want to know what abilities I have given you compared to this?" Leon laughed. Tony looked at Leon with a complicated look before asking, "What power do I have right now? Saber-toothed tiger Victor, you know?" Leon asked rhetorically. "Of course I know." Tony naturally knew that there was a way to understand some things that ordinary people could not know, and then he looked at him and said, "Isn't it? Is that resilience? Yes, you are now a mutant, and what I implanted in your body is derived from the restorative ability of the saber-toothed tiger Victor, which is a healing factor. No matter how badly you are injured, you can recover in a short time, unless you lose your head." Victor's recovery ability is indeed extremely strong, but it is still not insoluble, and after cutting off his head, his recovery ability is naturally useless. And Leon's healing factor is much stronger than Victor's. He is growing every minute, getting stronger. In his current body, even if he loses his head, it can grow a new body from under his head. He could be so sure, but certainly wouldn't have tried it that way. Oh God. Tony was dumbfounded, and even more incredulous. Now that you have recovered from your previous injuries, you don't need to carry that funny magnetic coil with you anymore, and there is also a point that the after effects of radiation have disappeared, and you are now a normal person. Leon said. Tony looked complicated. He knew the place and situation of mutants in society, but he didn't think that one day he himself would become one of them. "But I would like to advise you that until the situation is clear, you had better conceal this identity. Of course, in fact, with your mind and position, it doesn't matter whether you hide it or not, it mainly depends on your own will." Leon stunned Tony with these words, and then he said, "Don't you need me to do anything? I definitely need you to do things for me, but not now. Now you are no different from ordinary people in my eyes. And the money capital that you are proud of does not have the slightest bright spot in my eyes. After all, I am richer than you. So, grow up as soon as possible, or you will die if I take back your powers." This was Leon's advice to him. Tony was silent, did not open his mouth again. There may be unwillingness in his heart, but at this time he did not show it. He did not know what kind of ability Leon had, but now he could not deny it, because he was the beneficiary. "Oh yes, don't you want to get the energy of the suit? Go back and let Jarvis figure out a map of Stark Industrial Park for you, and then think about it, and you'll get the answer." Episode 36. Tony had no doubts about Leon's abilities, and although he wondered why Leon had asked him to go back to see the map of Stark Industrial Park, he did so. After he left, Leon asked Svija to watch his movements and see what would happen next to him. And what followed did not exceed his expectations, and in the days that followed, Tony's side was secretly lurking, jealously trying to get his Mark-type steel suit, and a few days later, one night, Leon received a hint from Svija. "Sir, there is a strong energy reaction over the city. There are 2 energy sources. I have ruled out the small surveillance drone to go out. Do I need to send the picture over?" Leon was now embracing Lorna, and the two were lying in the huge bath, surrounded by warm water and bubbles, and drinks and red wine were in their hands. He was slightly stunned, and then said, "Send it here." "What's wrong, honey?" Lorna was puzzled, not knowing who he was talking to. "Nothing, let you see a good show." With the words falling on the kung fu, a projection screen appeared in front of the two people's eyes, which showed the dark night sky, and 2 objects in the center of the screen were moving rapidly. One was a bright silver humanoid mech, the other was a pure silver humanoid mech. the latter was significantly larger than the former. The two objects moved rapidly in the air, and from time to time, there were energy rays spraying and hitting each other. Wow, are they fighting? What the hell is this? Lorna was suddenly interested, straightening up and not caring about the unexpected spring light. Leon smiled and said, the small mech is Tony Stark, and inside the big one. I forgot, Svija, who is in there? Sir, it's Obadiah Stein, the top executive of Stark Industries. Svija's voice came from somewhere next to the bath. Leon nodded, then continued, that trumpet suit is called Mark II, the big one is called Iron Overlord, the two people have a vendetta, now Tony Stark is looking for that guy to take revenge, let's just watch. This is much more exciting than watching a movie. Lorna chuckled, how would you know that? Quite simply, I did it. Leon rode. Lorna shrugged her shoulders, she already had a deep understanding of the magic of this man, not only with a rich fortune, but also with powerful abilities, and means that made her unimaginable, which made her feel curious. It is precisely because of this that the relationship between the two will heat up rapidly, and now she basically has to come to meet with him at both ends of the 3 days, and it can be said that some of the things shown by Liang have gradually fascinated her. At this time, the two mechs fight higher and higher, and from time to time, energy beams are fired, or micro-shaped missiles are fired, bursting out a ball of fire in the high sky. This movement was naturally also detected by others, and Svija's voice came again, Sir, the FBI and several other secret departments have found them, and now there are helicopters in the air, and if the drone continues to monitor, it will be easy to be found later. Don't worry about this, keep watching, this drama will be watched anyway. Leon laughed. Yes, sir. The fight between the two in the picture has reached a fever pitch, from the initial ranged attack to now become a melee fight. The Iron Overlord gradually gained the upper hand in the fight with his stout appearance, and the Mark II type was completely beaten without the ability to fight back. Wow, look at them like this, it's time to divide the winners and losers. Lorna exclaimed. Because she saw the Iron Overlord punch Tony out of more than 10 meters, rolling in midair, it was difficult to stabilize the state, but then he was hit in the chest by a heavy punch from the Iron Overlord, and flew out of the chest for more than 10 meters again. Well, it's not the end yet, everything is hard to say, let's see. Liang Rance Tao. In the picture, the two people come and go, but it is always the Iron Overlord who is attacking, and Tony is defending, looking like it will be defeated in a short time. Sigh, in the end it is still young, whereas Obadiah's heart is fierce. Sigh, look at that heavy punch, ordinary people can fight so tricky, well, but also specifically to hit the key point, mad and fast. Liang, while watching and commenting, teasing Lorna, giggled. The two did not care that the two sides in the picture were fighting for life and death, completely regarded this as a drama. Lorna did not know the inside story, so the feeling was not intuitive, and Liang did not matter. In the picture, Tony can't see it, so he climbs directly into the air, and the Iron Overlord is obviously inferior to the Mark II in terms of movement speed and dexterity, and he also hurried to catch up at this time. Well, the drama is coming. Episode 37. In the picture, after the two people one after the other, they quickly jumped into two streamers into the sky, all the way up, and soon rose to a height of 10,000 meters. At this height, the temperature plummeted, already below zero, and the temperature was only more than 40 degrees below zero. At such a temperature, many aircraft cannot operate, and at this altitude, the two have not stopped. Liang's drone can only fly to an altitude of 13,000 meters at most, not to go up, and the two of them are almost out of the drone's camera line of sight at this time. Fortunately, at the end of the shot, the two people can still be seen, and two flames begin to flicker, that is, the thrusters of the two mech suits have failed in a low-temperature environment. The former suddenly turned around and directly hit the Iron Overlord. The latter had already condensed its ice crystals at this time, and the two were the same. The Iron Overlord was hit hard, like an iron lump, and fell downwards, and Tony was the same, but the thruster behind him still had a spark, and he fell under the Iron Overlord dynasty. Wow, then both of them must be dead. Lorna was surprised. Leon smiled. Don't worry, the people in the Iron Overlord are definitely going to die, and Tony is not. Why? Lorna asked him. Because I implanted him with the ability of the saber-toothed tiger. This guy can recover in a short period of time even if he is seriously injured, and it is obvious that he has no fear in looking so desperate. Liang said very calmly, but the words fell in Lorna's ears like thunder, making her look shocked, turning her head and looking at him in surprise. Can you make ordinary people become mutants? Liang nodded. Yes, this is not difficult. What's wrong? Phew. It's so hard to believe that you'd better keep the news secret, because if you let people or organizations at the national level know, they will definitely come to you for trouble. Lorna explained a little worriedly. Rest assured, there is an old saying in the Heavenly Dynasty that soldiers will come to cover the water. I didn't think to keep this news secret, and you think this country is really so useless? There are some things that you can't hide even if you want to. Leon is very indifferent. In his opinion, there are some things that always have to be faced. Seeing that Lorna was still a little uneasy, Leon kissed her and said, "Don't worry, I am much stronger than you think, and when that day comes, you will know if I lied. But do you want to increase your ability as well? Saber-toothed tigers are still very resilient, can I?" Lorna was visibly impressed. As a mutant, she certainly knew which of the mutant's abilities were powerful, and the saber-toothed tiger's self-healing ability was one of them. "Of course, it is better to be lucky. I will implant you tonight, so that I can also rest assured of your safety." He laughed. "You're such a good man." Lorna gave a fragrant kiss. After a few moments, the two mechs in the picture were only about a kilometer off the ground, and when the two looked at it, they saw two silver things falling from the sky, entangled with each other, and then smashed down hard in the downtown area of Manhattan neighborhood. The drone is farther away, but everything is clearly shown in the shot. The Iron Overlord is pressed underneath by Tony, and the place where the two fell is smashed out of a large pit. The earth and stones are splashed, and the smoke and dust are rolling. The camera zooms closer, and when the smoke clears, the two see the scene in the field. The Iron Overlord's mech was damaged, and red blood flowed from its gaps, while the Mark II suit on it was motionless, as if it were dead. "Wouldn't it really be dead?" Lorna asked. Leon shook his head. "I'll know the answer right away." As he expected, Tony had the healing factor in his body, and he would certainly not die so easily, and within 10 seconds of effort, he had already stood up slowly, and then the thrusters on Mark II's body burst into flames, and Tony just looked at the Iron Overlord on the ground, and then directly took off and flew away. At this time, the sound of police cars had already sounded around them, and people around them had also gathered around, looking at the Iron Overlord on the ground and talking about it. The drama is over. Leon clapped his hands. When the camera disappears, he pulls Lorna up, who is not the first time to bathe with him, and seems to be generous, and after the two are ready, Leon takes her to a hidden laboratory in an instant. Naturally, he came here to inject a healing factor into her, and he was never stingy with women, let alone a woman like Lorna who had already confirmed a relationship with him, and he naturally wanted to ensure her safety in the future. Episode 38. That night, he injected the healing factor into Lorna, who fused successfully, without a hint of rejection, and he used a knife to cut an opening in the palm of the latter's hand, and his wound recovered within 3 seconds. "Well, I feel like my control over the magnetic force is slowly increasing," Lorna said. Leon raised an eyebrow and nodded. "This is normal. The healing factor is changing your body, and at the same time strengthening your ability. Don't worry, just adapt slowly." At night, the two naturally came to a friendly match, and the next day they slept until the third pole of the day. Usually, Leon is still very idle, so during the day with Lorna, the two look at each other ordinary couples to play around. Only when they play in the playground, Leon received a call from Tony. "Man, someone already knows I'm a mutant," Tony said directly. "Who knows?" Leon asked him. "The FBI, the CIA, and SHIELD. Leon heard the words and then smiled. "What is their attitude? Is it to take you away for slicing research?" "No kidding, I'm already being watched by them now, and they've restricted my activities, especially the NSA guys, who want to blackmail me into handing over Mark armor." "Oh, and the Mark armor is the same thing I used last night," Tony said in a cannon burst. "I know, man, you don't have to say this. You called and just wanted to tell me this?" Leon asked. "Of course not. I want to tell you that I didn't give you an explanation, but with the ability of those people, they will definitely find you, so you should be prepared early." Tony seemed a little undertow-helmed when he said this. Leon heard the words but smiled. "Are you guilty of me? Damn, I'm not kidding you." Tony was a little angry. "Okay, I see, even if you give me up, it doesn't matter, but I'm satisfied with your attitude. Don't forget that you're going to work for me in the future." Leon laughed. "Bastard." The other side scolded and hung up the phone. With Tony's temper, it was already rare to be able to take the initiative to tell Leon these things, and Leon did not have any angry thoughts about it, because he knew that the other party was such a person. "What's wrong, honey?" Lorna couldn't help but ask when she saw him like this. "It's all right, just a little thing, let's move on." Leon had only a smile on his face and could not see anything else. The two of them had been out for a day, and when they got tired of playing, Leon sent Lorna back to Adeline's side while he went back to his quarters. Only when he came out of his personal elevator, his brow frowned imperceptibly, because he noticed that there was someone in his house. Opening the door to enter it, I was immediately hit by several guns. "Hold your head and crouch down. We are CIA. You're under arrest." A group of heavily armed special combatants, each holding a gun, a laser red dot aimed at his body, replaced by ordinary people must be scared half to death, but he only slightly raised his eyelids. There were a dozen people in front of him, fanning around him, and when he entered the door, people on both sides rushed up and tried to subdue him. Unfortunately, they didn't know what kind of monster they were facing. Leon only raised his hand slightly, and this action made everyone's hearts tighten. "Damn, don't move." Someone was drinking. But Liang was not moved, and his hand gradually increased. At this time the commander of the other side shouted, "Fire!" In an instant, more than a dozen guns began to swallow the tongue of fire, and a bullet flew out of the muzzle and directly hit Liang. Then the next moment, something that shocked everyone happened. Just one bullet after another, as if blocked by an invisible hand, hovered in front of Liang's half-squinting place, as if there was an invisible barrier protecting him. These people shot out all the bullets in the gun, but when they wanted to change the magazine, they found that their bodies could not move. "No!" the conductor shouted in horror, but Leon just smiled at him and snapped his fingers. The next moment, the dense bullets in front of Liang flew back along the way. At this moment, a man from behind the couch wall ran out and shouted, "Stop!" Unfortunately, he called too late. Poof! Countless bullets rained down on the shooter's body, and one bullet after another was poured out. None of them fell, and all of them fell into the bodies of those special combatants. Suddenly, countless blood flowers burst out from these people's bodies. Some people were lucky, they were shot in the head, and they died without feeling pain, while some people were unlucky. With just one face, these attackers have been completely annihilated. Episode 39. More than a dozen special operators were killed and injured by bullets in their own guns in this instant. Some fell down in mourning, while others were directly killed. The scene suddenly became like purgatory. Countless scarlet blood gushed out like a fountain, and in a moment it stained a large area of the ground red, and those who were wailing also followed in a moment. At this moment, the person who had just run out from behind the wall had already widened his eyes, his face full of shock, pointing at Liang for half a day and unable to speak. "Who are you?" Leon asked in a flat voice. "Damn. Do you know what you've done?" The man was furious and a little angry. "None of this matters, what matters is, who the hell are you? What is the purpose of coming to my side?" Liang's face did not change for a moment. The man in front of him was a middle-aged white man facing very ordinary, each a little shorter than him, with a somewhat pitiful hairline, wearing a suit and holding a pistol in one hand. "I'm SHIELD Agent Phil, and you are now suspected of endangering national security, and I have the exact arrest warrant here, but now it is clear that you have to add one charge to the crime of resisting arrest and killing." Agent Phil's face was solemn. Liang was slightly surprised, so he had the heart to take a good look at the person in front of him, but then he smiled. "Are you sure you want to arrange such a crime for me? It seems that at this time, the person you should arrest the most is not me, right?" Seeing that he had no fear, Agent Phil's heart also sank, although the intelligence said that he was a mutant, but he did not expect Leon to be so difficult and so fierce. "Also, tell me, what point do I endanger national security?" Leon said suddenly. He has a status and a position in this world, and there are forces that people cannot resist, and if he wants to, he can even single-handedly counter the entire country, which is not just talk. So in this case, it is better to say that he killed decisively, or that he did not care about the state apparatus. In short, he will not show mercy to those who are hostile to him. Let go of the saber-toothed tiger and Magneto, that's because these people are still useful for keeping, and these special operators are really no big deal for Leon. Agent Phil looked heavy and said slowly, "We suspect that you have the ability to transform ordinary people into mutants, which endangers national security, so you need to go back with us and assist us in the investigation. But now that you're rebelling against law enforcement, which is already a crime, I have more reason to arrest you." Leon just shook his head and smiled, squinted at him, and then his body floated up more than 20 centimeters, so lightly drifting over the dead bodies and blood on the ground. Past Agent Phil landed at the table, took a bottle of red wine and poured a glass in his hand to taste. Seeing him do this, Agent Phil's heart couldn't help but sink, but the next moment he heard Liang laugh and say, "You may not have figured out one thing. I am a law-abiding citizen of this country, and I am also a high taxpayer of this country. My annual taxes and fees are as high as $10 billion US. Don't use your imagination to disgust me, this means can't scare me. Another thing you have to understand is that you suspect that I am afraid of having the ability to transform ordinary people into mutants. Even if I admit it, then I have not broken any law. You say that I endanger national security. Please tell me, which law prohibits the transformation of ordinary people into mutants? Finally, this is my private residence, even if you hold an arrest warrant, but under the false charges, the arrest order is obviously problematic, and based on this alone, even if I kill all of you, I will be fine, and it is a big deal to fight some lawsuits with you. Also, go back and tell the one-eyed dragon that the next time there is such a temptation, I will go to your lair." After Liang said this, he put down the goblet in his hand, casually pointed to the door, and said, "These are my advice to you, whether it is SHIELD or other intelligence services, it is best not to bother me if you are fine. If you really anger me, there are some consequences that you can't afford, so please leave." His words made Agent Phil's face change, and he wanted to lift the gun in his hand, but he always had a cone-like sense of fear in the face of Leon, which had saved him several times in the past, so he could only endure it and not make a sound. "Are you going to disobey the laws of this country?" In the end, he could only threaten like this. Liang smiled when he heard this, and said directly, law? That's just a rule made by the strong for the weak. Do you think I look like the weak? You better sort out your own mess. As far as I know, there are a lot of Hydra people in S.H.I.E.L.D., don't blame me for not reminding you. What? Agent Phil was agitated, and his face changed dramatically. Leon shook his head and held out his hand to Phil, who subconsciously exclaimed, what are you going to do? The next moment, Phil and the corpses on the ground, along with the blood and water, suddenly disappeared. That's a lot of talk. Leon skimmed his lips. Episode 40. The corpses of Agent Phil and those special operators were directly teleported by Leon to a wasteland outside New York by his ability, and Agent Phil looked at everything in front of him in shock, and when he looked back at the corpses of those people, his face suddenly became ugly. He hurriedly took out a communicator, operated on it, and then located his current position, and then contacted a person. Director, the mission failed, the target killed the CIA special combatants. He didn't care that this was standing on American soil. I thought it was necessary to terminate the plan first, because the target was too dangerous, and he gave me the feeling that he was the kind of person who didn't care about the lives of others at all. Agent Phil spoke directly after the communication was connected. There was a slight silence in the communicator, and then a low voice came, I will first contact the CIA people to stop the next action. Contact the target person, first come here for the time being, you come back first, and then I will decide the direction of the next mission. Okay. Agent Phil was visibly relieved that, to be honest, he really didn't want to face Leon too much. The man had given him the feeling of being too dangerous, even in the face of the mutant's wildest murderous maniac. It felt like a huge volcano, covered in snow when it was calm, seemingly beautiful and ordinary, but in fact it contained an incomparable danger, attracting such a person, like a volcanic eruption, and the energy that erupted was enough to affect the world. This was his subconscious and his sixth sense, a feeling that had saved his life many times in the past, so he believed in his own perception. Aside from his side, Liang's side seemed very relaxed, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the traffic under his feet. He did not have a sense of panic, just now that little thing for him, it was only an extremely easy little thing. The reason why he is so confident is because he knows how big his ability really is, not to mention the superpower, that is, his own wealth accumulation is now unimaginable to ordinary people. On the surface, he has a net worth of more than $3 billion, but in fact few people can know his exact wealth, how rich he really is, and so far only Svija knows, because it manages all of Leon's capital operations. He never puts his eggs in a basket, and on the surface his capital is more than 3 billion yuan, but secretly he has more than 10 times more money than this capital, and all this capital is in the stock market. No one knows that America's top 50 companies and enterprises have his equity in it, and if anyone can investigate clearly, it will come to a terrible conclusion, and his total capital has exceeded the terrible level of 500 billion. If he wanted to, he could easily destroy most of the American stock market by leverage, and then the entire United States would suffer the most terrible economic crisis ever, and when the dollar was no longer valuable, even if the United States conquered and printed more dollars, it would not help. Because that's a chain reaction, every country in the world will dump dollar treasuries, and then, without Leon's extra shots, the United States will usher in the end. He hid these things well, but it wasn't that no one knew. He's strong at the capital level, and some in the Liberal Party know it, some in the Republican Party know it, the current president knows it, and the people who are expected to become president know it. So he has always been a person who has been co-opted by the ruling party and the opposition party in the United States, and it is clear that this time the CIA is carrying the pot for people, and it has to be said that they are really unlucky. Diska, selling the stocks of the top 50 to top 30 companies in the United States by market capitalization, causing a round of turmoil in the stock market. This is some of my warnings to the top brass in the United States. Leon commanded. Okay sir, out of 20 companies, we hide the value of the stock worth more than 120 billion US dollars. This round of sell-off is expected to make the entire American stock market turbulent for half a month, according to the chain effect. The stock market losses of more than 600 billion yuan, affecting the entire United States. Viskerdau. Leon nodded, then continued, just do it, it's time to shear a wave of wool, then you calculate the timing and prepare to read the bottom. Okay sir. Leon wanted to let the top brass in the United States know how important he was, and if anyone dared to play tricks with him, he wouldn't mind making those people cry. More than $100 billion was not an important thing for him, and even if it was all lost, he would not be distressed. Svija's existence is the key to his gallop in the stock market, and in order to increase Svija's computing power, he secretly built 3 supercomputers, the kind that alone is enough to rank in the top 10 of all supercomputers.